Hello, welcome back to my channel. So today, I'm actually going to talk about Egyptian mythology, practices, rituals, funerary practices, something that I've been interested in a really long time. I was really fascinated by it and I wrote this essay. I'm going to go over Egyptian mythology, ritual, and funerary practices. So in ancient civilizations, they didn't have iPhones. So a large component of these civilizations involved having set systems for survival. This will include agriculture, trading, documentation, and math, which I can't do. Ancient Egypt, located in the northeast of Africa, and it's placed beside the Nile River. The Nile extends through the desert of Egypt, and it is flowing from south to north, so it's backwards. Upstream Egypt was the south, and downstream Egypt was the north. So because the Nile is such a barren desert, they relied on the Nile River to be able to survive. Egyptians are to thank for a lot of the technologies that we have in current day. They were upgraded throughout history, obviously. Papyrus, which is a form of paper, a cubit, talking about math, it's a form of measurement. You see the most notable invention is the calendar system, which we still have today. I think the mythology and the practice of Egypt are to be credited as well for their persistence and the advancement of society. Due to mythology and the worship of gods, Egyptians were influenced both socially and culturally, especially in regards to ritual and funerary practices. The origins of Egyptian mythology date back to the early dynastic period. So this is in terms of written evidence and temples. The main deity and the central god in the Egyptian pantheon is the sun god Ra, and rightfully so. The town known as Iunu or Heliopolis was named the city of the sun god. And this was inspired by Ra. So Ra is said to have come from the world bringing light alongside him. He was the creator of everything, as well as patron for the first pharaoh. So the joyous tears of Ra brought forth humankind. This is something I find really interesting with mythology, like how the gods create humanity or how they create other gods. Like, it's always in this weird way. That's something I find really enlightening, like how these stories are developed. Ra also brought forth his offspring, which was the air god Shu and the goddess of rain Tefnut. From Shu and Tefnut, the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut were created. Historically, Narmer was the first pharaoh. However, mythologically speaking, the first pharaoh patron was Ra. Thus, he gifted Egypt animals such as the ox, the lions, alongside the Nile River. In the Handbook of Egyptian Mythology, which was published in 2002 by Geraldine Pinch, Pinch writes, from the 26th century BCE to the Roman period, all rulers of Egypt called themselves sons of Ra. The enemies of Ra were the enemies of Egypt and Ma'at, the divine order. So, this is obviously indicating how mythology influenced the pharaohs as well as the systems in which society was divided. So the social class of Egypt was composed of the pharaohs, the officials, the soldiers, priests, scribes, merchants, artisans, and farmers, and lastly slaves. Royal, free citizen, or slave. Pharaohs were seen as appointed by gods, therefore their images were worshipped by the commoners like godlike figures. So demigods. Ancient Egypt was an agrarian society as farmers, peasants, were the large majority. Even though the Egyptians calculated 365 days in their calendar follows 3 seasons, and that was based on the Nile River. So the seasons were known as Akhet, Perit, and Shemu. So Akhet was the time of inundation. So Perit was a time to plant seeds and tend to the crops, and lastly Shemu was a time to gather the annual harvest. Life in ancient Egypt is ritual. Everything that they do revolves around ritual, and it was a collective and social action. Everybody was a part of it. During the time in which farming was not permissible on account of the flooding, time was spent building pyramids and temples and tending to animals. Farming was a social ritual, but it was also a family ritual, as members of the family contributed to the land. Firstly, the soil was broken down with the help of the men, which many animals relied on for farming. So the ox would plow the soil, and then the women of the family would spread and scour the seeds. And a herd of sheep would bury the seeds with their hooves along the livestock. So it's a very intricate process, a very intelligent process. They are laborious, but they're, using the animals alongside them to, obtain these means. Because these animals were appreciated for living and sustaining life and working alongside people, they were often worshipped because of this. They were highly respected. Cats were kept as house pets, but they were often admired deeply. All sorts of feline animals were looked upon. The farmers, they would actually bring their pet cats to the fields because they can help with mice infestation. Cats have been also known to hunt cobras. Bastet, the cat goddess, would battle Apet, the serpent. Bastet is the daughter of the sun god. This is how she was depicted. Iconography and symbolism for her looks like that. Apep the serpent was seen as the opponent of light and the bringer of chaos. Many of the Egyptian prayers were thought to ward off Apep in ensuring that Ra has a pleasant journey across the sky. So mythologically, the cat goddess Bastet was the offering of Ra, the sun god. Bastet is the goddess of fertility, motherhood, as well as protector of the home. Due to the worship of Bastet, a lot of ancient Egyptians believed in the sacredness of cats. Thus, if you would kill a cat, you would be punished by death. The last 5 days of the year, they were known as the demon days, as Egyptians consider them to be bad luck. A lot of good luck gifts were given amongst people. Good luck gifts included anything as far as amulets or any other form of jewelry or figurines of Bastet. Because Bastet was symbolism for fertility and success, having a figure of Bastet would bring good luck because it would show that you would have a successful year. Bastet was depicted holding a citrum and a manat. The manat was seen as divine protection against bad luck. The citrum made rattling noises in times of celebration. I also remembered that the serpent god also goes by the name Apophis, so either a pep or Apophis. Is how interesting different cultures would take different interpretations of gods based on the needs of that society. So, if you need protection or if you need fertility, the African fertility statues, or with the ancient Greeks, because Bastet was associated with motherhood, and the protector of mothers in childhood, the Greeks would associate her with Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, chastity, and childbirth. I really love how there's this overarching concept of a needed worship, but that has taken many forms. The followers of Bastet were located in Bubastis. Bubastis held many festivals in the name of Bastet and feline animals as a whole. Many tourists mummified their cats in that city. There were also cat cemeteries. This could be seen as a way to honor how they've served them. According to the Greek historian and writer Herodotus, in an account of Egypt, states that during the annual festivities of Bubastis, a great number of people sailed to the city and partake in making music, dancing, and consuming large sums of wine. This annual ritual was a form of worship for the goddess Bastet. Aside from being a goddess, Bastet has many great qualities in the eyes of the Egyptian people. So the link between human and cats strengthens because of the mythology behind it. Now we're going to get into the funerary ritual, which is my favorite part. Amongst many rituals in ancient Egypt, the funerary process is the most elaborate and respected. Death is not the end of life itself, but it's merely a passage to another realm, the afterlife. The funerary processes are extremely detailed. Bodies are preserved through mummification, and this most likely began around 2600 BC. Typically, the common people weren't mummified because the process was long and expensive. The pharaohs and the members of nobility were the ones to receive the 70-day mummification process. Once the body had died physically, their bodies were cleaned. Once the body decays after a few days, transnasal excerberation was done by removing the brain through the nostrils using hooks. The priests actually worked as embalmers. The main priest wore the jackal mask of Anubis, the god of the dead. Shout out to anyone who was obsessed with House of Anubis as a child, because I certainly was. And guess what? I rewatched it like 50 times. The other thing that would happen is the liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were removed and embalmed separately and placed individual in containers called canoptic jars. These jars were actually depicted with the gods who were meant to guard the organs. So Hapi is the baboon-headed god who represented the north, and he guards the lungs. Duamtuf is a jackal-headed god who represents the east, and he guards the stomach. Imsidi is the human-headed who represents the south, and he guards the liver. And lastly, the falcon-headed god, Quebhebsenuf, who represents the West, and he guards the intestines. So sorry if I butchered any of that. What I find interesting is that regardless of all these organs being removed, the heart was actually kept in the body, because a lot of the Egyptians believed that this was the essence and the wisdom of a person. The heart was wrapped in linen and natron, which consisted of baking soda and salt. So upon doing that, the heart was later placed back inside the body, into the chest of the corpse. The heart was also embalmed with charms for protection, and the embalmer would say prayers while conducting the ritual, as well as adding prayers to the linen in writing. After the body had been dried, it was stuffed with linen, sawdust, and Nile mud and resin, and there might be some other things. The embalmer also added false eyes to the head. The body is then covered with oils and wrapped around with linen, which is, the mummy. The tomb in which the bodies remain were adorned with jewels, ornament masks, and gold, alongside very luxurious items that were practically used every day: food, furniture, mummified pets, and sometimes mummified servants that would serve in the afterlife. So this was done to ensure that the spirits would have everything that they would need in the afterlife. This mummification was done in favor of the soul itself. Many Egyptians believed that the body was a sacred home for the spirits and did not intend on the souls being lost in the afterlife, especially if the body was not kept in extreme precise conditions. Once the physical aspect of the funerary practices were carried out, the ceremony known as the opening of the mouth and eyes were conducted, in which the priest would touch the body senses to awaken them for the afterlife. The deceased then transformed into an Akh, and an Akh is the transfigured spirit or the soul of a deceased person. The Akh, which is both the Ka, the double form, the life essence, and the Ba, which is the soul between earth and heaven, it was a union. The Akh was not ready to travel to the underworld and face the final judgment before gaining entrance into the afterlife. The ceremony would allow the spirit of the deceased to see, hear, taste, speak, and breathe. The mummy is then placed in a coffin, or many coffins, and the tomb is sealed. In many tombs, there will be a statue known as the Serdab in closed chambers. The final judgment is one where the soul must endure after physical death in order to receive passage into the afterlife. The spirits have to pass through a duat, and this is the realm of the dead. This realm is home to many monsters, vast caverns, and lakes of fire. Shout out Nirvana. Apet, the serpent demon of chaos, waits to swallow these souls. The Egyptian Book of the Dead contains funerary texts with spells, prayers, and codes as a guide for spirits to pass through the underworld and reach the goddess Mat. Mat is the goddess of truth as well as cosmic order and justice. Upon entering the underworld, these souls will be judged by 42 assessor gods. The gods have to be convinced that these souls lived a righteous life, they were just. Each soul must address each god and declare a sin that they have not committed while they were alive. So this is called the process of the negative confession or declaration of innocence. So upon the completion would be the weighing of the heart against the feather of Mat. The Egyptians used a heart scarab, an amulet, which was made out of stone with the imagery of a dung beetle. The amulet was used to silence the heart of the soul while it was being weighed in the afterlife. This was done so that the heart could not falsely testify against the deceased. These amulets have spells carved into them. According to the spell 30b in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, do not stand up against me as a witness, do not contradict me in the court, do nothing against me in front of the deities. Do not trust me with hostility in front of Keeper of the Balance. Do not speak lies against me beside the great God. This translation was done by the Walters Museum. Got my handy dandy copy here. Chapter 4, not allowing the heart of a man to be driven away from him in the underworld. So that would be plate number 15 XV in Roman numerals. And it says, of not allowing to be driven away the heart of Osiris, the scribe of the divine offering of gods, all Ani triumphant, from him in the netherworld. He said, my heart, my mother twice, my heart, my coming into existence, not be there resistance to me in judgment, not be there repulse to me by the divine chiefs, not make thy separation from me in the presence of the keeper of the scale. Thou art my double within my body, forming and making strong my limbs. Mayest thou come forth to the place of happiness to which we advance thee. Not may make to stink my name. The heart is then weighed against the feather, and Anubis will perform this task, as I have just read. If the heart is heavier than the feather, then the crocodile Amit, the devourer, will consume the soul. If the heart is pure or lighter than the feather, or if it balances, then Ra, the sun god, would take the soul to Osiris, who is the god of the underworld. Osiris will have the final approval for the soul's fate. Once approved, the soul is said to have a long journey through the fields of reeds, and thus they will have an eternity of tranquility. To conclude, mythology and ritual have heavily impacted the way that ancient Egyptians sustain their livelihood, the way that they navigate their daily lives. The majority of their day consists of repetition and rituals. All the social classes have a role to play to ensure that things are going smoothly. Mythology has been the backbone of ancient Egypt. You cannot separate them. In the way that funerary practices primary focus throughout their life. Culturally, they don't frown upon death. They don't see it as a melancholic affair, but they rather see it as a love and admiration for life. They wish to enjoy it in eternity, in the afterlife. I think that the belief in an afterlife and being able to live eternally somewhere else is what created the gateway into influencing this ritual. Thanks so much for watching. If there's any other thing that you found interesting about ancient Egypt, I would love to know in the comments, because I will be going on a Wikipedia deep dive to learn more.